Yes, Mika.
On this idea of the homecoming, it's actually what I was thinking about too, and I'm really interested in this passage on page 54 where it says that Heidegger says, what a thinker has thought can be mastered only if he has everything in his thought that is still unthought back to the original truth. And I think
Can you tell us where you are?
On page 54,
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Got it.
So, and I think what's interesting is he's talking about this, and then he goes on to talk about what would completion and overcoming mean. And I feel like this is a kind of a retelling of the homecoming story that we see in the beginning of the chapter, where the boy kind of stands in for the unthought and perhaps the originating truth for the mother. And what happens if the boy comes home? This question: what happens if the boy comes home? And it would be some sort of completion. The wholeness would be restored, and then overcome in this act. So I think it's. I just wanted to point that out. This idea of how does overcoming occur.
But you said then the completion itself is overcome? Is that what you said? Or
that the overcoming is accomplished only through a completion. For Heidegger, the boy has to come home to his mother for us to leave that kind of scene.
Okay. If that were the case, and this is a very strong reading you're proposing, nonetheless, I would want to consider if it's recuperative, you know what I'm saying, and if it's too happy an ending, though indeed I can't ignore that Heidegger is mapping, at least on one register, what it would mean to push the unthought back to its originary truth. Don't forget that here, and this is about thoughtful dialogue, and I think that is where we want to connect it, so thank you for returning us to this home base. The thoughtful dialogue, how does that take place, and so on and so forth. This I just say this almost impertinently because I'm not sure how it connects up with what we're doing here, but he's working up against the refutation and the rejection. So that's maybe how, I mean, Hannah Arendt, I think, carries with her a wounding of some sort of implicit rejection and refutation. I thought I felt that in that, I don't know if you agree, in the interview that we saw, that underneath, there is an unspoken, I thought, rejection. But the point that he's making is that no thinker can ever be overcome by our refuting him and stacking up around him or her, it's a thinker, a literature of refutation. I would like to point out that Heidegger is also being a bit of a musician here and trying to set the tone, the volume, a kind of bringing in a pianissimo. He's trying to quiet down the rising acrimony of disputation. So Nietzsche, in the meantime, goes on being bravely refuted. This becomes then an industry where that fabricates thoughts ascribed to him. In class, we try to show how Heidegger is also creating a kind of installing a sanitation department. He's very concerned about what gets the kind of stuff that gets that those who think they can encounter Nietzsche are infecting him with and sticking it to him. And so I'm glad you brought us here. I think it's very complicated. What is the originary truth, and what are there figurations for that? Maybe you wanted to say something about any of this, or maybe we have other interventions. Yes, you and then you.
Well, can I just say this?
Sure,
that
please.
If the originary truth, I mean, in that that line on 54. What a thinker has thought can be mastered only if we refer everything in his thought that is still unthought back to its originary truth. My question is whether the necessity of losing the thinker or of departing from the thinker is not actually part of that originary truth. Because this whole essay is being written against formulas that will tell us what thinking is, platitudes that recirculate and keep us from thinking, scholastic efforts to find out what Nietzsche really meant. And he's actually suggesting that we, and there's this great moment after you've discovered me, it was no trick to find me, the difficulty now is to lose me. In other words, what would it mean to lose Nietzsche or to not keep him, capture him through formulas, platitudes, scholastic, domestications. So I actually think the originary truth is a kind of departure from mastery capture, letting him go, a letting go. Rather than a returning home and a staying home.
Because there's the audience, but who's the audience of thinking?
Well, I am my own audience in thinking. So then the question would be, how do I appear to myself, or do I appear? And it seems to me that the voice, that it's more a question of audibility than visibility at that moment. So, and we have to remember that the term appearance is being, in some sense, lifted from Plato and turned against him. And it would be all forms of sensuous availability, which would include the auditory. So we would have to be able to think, as we have had to be able to think with Rousseau, about what the silent voice would be. It would be a peculiar mode of appearance, but I would still have to show up for myself. I think that's an interesting problem, but I think that is the problem.
I just would add that it's very hard for me to respond to these aspects of the text by Arendt, because I would almost say, provocatively perhaps, that she's right, she's not a philosopher here. Every term is an irritant for me, if I may say so. But of course, I did an emergency job last night and would have to read several times. I don't understand how she could have gone through all of the things and thinking that she has. I see this almost as a traumatic breakdown. Perhaps you can, is this after or with, what's the relation to the thinking around Eichmann? Because there's almost, it seems to me, par rapport, in relation to the training and work she's done, this is almost a regression and
Which
cling to
the thought, action, the I, to and
a
one.
number, even the self. I wonder, is it a plea? Is she building? Is she rebooting?